The French Connection wasn't just a gritty crime thriller, it was a guerrilla war on film. It captured the underbelly of New York with raw, documentary-style chaos. But behind the camera, things were even more dangerous. Car chases without permits, gunplay in real traffic, and actors pushed to physical and emotional breaking points. This is a film that changed the language of thrillers, but left destruction in its wake. Here are 20 weird facts about The French Connection, including casting rebellions, real mob interference, a death-defying chase that nearly killed a man, and a bonus fact so shocking it was kept quiet for decades. Let's dive in. But first, buckle up. The ride gets brutal. 1. Gene Hackman was the studio's last choice. Gene Hackman wasn't supposed to play Popeye Doyle. In fact, the studio tried to cast nearly everyone but Hackman. Steve McQueen said no. So did Paul Newman, James Caan, Lee Marvin, and even Jackie Gleason. Director William Friedkin didn't believe Hackman had the grit for the role either. He later admitted, "I didn't think Gene had the violence inside him." But Hackman's transformation stunned everyone. He became Doyle, gritty, abrasive, obsessive. But it came at a cost. Hackman later confessed he hated playing such a racist, violent character. "I felt dirty," he said. Still, that discomfort translated to a raw, lived-in performance that made Popeye Doyle unforgettable. Sometimes, the perfect fit is the one no one saw coming. 2. The chase scene was shot illegally, with real pedestrians. That jaw-dropping car chase under the elevated subway? It wasn't choreographed, it was hijacked. Director William Friedkin didn't have a filming permit from the city of New York. He and stunt driver Bill Hickman just got in a car and did it. Real cars, real traffic, real people on the sidewalks. At one point, a civilian's Pontiac crosses into the chase path and is actually hit. That wasn't planned. It just happened. And Friedkin kept it in. The terror you see in Hackman's face during the chase? That wasn't acting. That was survival. In Friedkin's words, it was a controlled panic. A miracle no one died. 3. Friedkin lied to the studio. Repeatedly. William Friedkin wasn't just directing. He was manipulating. To keep the film under budget, he gave the studio fake call sheets and edited footage to mislead executives. When they asked if everything was safe, he said yes, while orchestrating some of the most dangerous stunts in film history. Friedkin also refused to use professional extras, opting instead to shoot cold, capturing real reactions from unsuspecting civilians. One scene in the subway had an actor throw a woman down the stairs. She wasn't an actress. She just happened to be there. Friedkin paid her $50 after the fact. The French Connection blurred the line between movie and madness. 4. The real Popeye was on set, and he was a monster. Eddie Egan, the real-life cop who inspired Popeye Doyle, worked as a technical advisor on set, and he made everyone miserable. He demanded changes to the script, berated actors for being too soft, and even challenged Gene Hackman to a fight. Friedkin called Egan the most arrogant, racist, and reckless person I'd ever met. And that was the guy they were basing the hero on. Ironically, Egan loved his portrayal. He thought Hackman didn't go far enough. He wanted it grittier, meaner. But the damage was done. Egan's overbearing presence nearly got him kicked off the production. It was like having a loaded weapon behind the scenes. 5. The film's villain was played by a real criminal. Fernando Rey plays the suave French drug kingpin, Alain Charnier, but he wasn't the first choice. Friedkin actually wanted Francisco Rabal, but there was a miscommunication. The casting agent confused him with Rey, and Friedkin only realized the mistake when Rey stepped off the plane. Too late to fix it, Friedkin decided to keep him. Here's the twist. Ray had once been involved with members of Spain's fascist government. He wasn't a drug dealer, but he had ties to real power and corruption. That air of calm menace? It wasn't entirely fictional. Sometimes casting accidents make the best villains. 6. Roy Scheider nearly quit. After a brutal street scene, before Jaws made him a household name, Roy Scheider played Buddy Russo, Popeye's quieter, cooler partner. But filming wasn't smooth for Scheider. During one winter shoot in a rough Brooklyn neighborhood, a local gang mistook the film crew for undercover cops. A real brawl erupted. Scheider, who was not a trained fighter, was shoved to the ground and nearly punched. One crew member had a gun drawn on him. Friedkin refused to cut. He shouted at the crew to keep rolling. After the scene, Scheider reportedly said, "This isn't a movie. This is madness." He seriously considered walking away. But Friedkin convinced him to stay, with the promise of more screen time and a hell of a legacy. He got both. 7. The film's dialogue was mostly improvised. You'd think a movie with such tight pacing would have a polished script. It didn't. Much of the dialogue in The French Connection was improvised on the spot. Friedkin wanted the film to feel like a documentary, raw, unpredictable, and unscripted. Hackman and Scheider were often given just the intent of a scene and told to go find it. That led to spontaneous lines like Hackman's, "Do you pick your feet in Poughkeepsie?"
Have you ever been in Poughkeepsie? You've been in Poughkeepsie, haven't you?
A bizarre interrogation tactic that came straight from real detective notes. Hackman hated the line. Friedkin loved it. That spontaneity gave the movie its jittery, kinetic energy and made every conversation feel like it could explode. 8. A cameraman was hit by the car. During the chase scene, that iconic chase wasn't just dangerous for pedestrians and drivers. Cinematographer Enrique Bravo was operating a handheld camera in the passenger seat of the stunt car, crouched down and bracing himself during the high-speed chaos. At one point, the car clipped a pillar, and Bravo was actually struck in the shoulder. He didn't drop the camera. He didn't even flinch. That footage is in the final film. Bravo later said he couldn't remember the exact moment it happened because he was too terrified to move. There was no CGI, no protective rig, just one man, one camera, and a brush with death that ended up in movie history. 9. The crew had to bribe the transit authority. Shooting scenes on a live subway in New York City is nearly impossible, especially in the 1970s. Permits were denied. Locations were locked down. So the French Connection crew did what most filmmakers wouldn't dare. They bribed the MTA. With $40,000 in cash, they bought 4 hours of elevated train time and some cooperation from motormen who agreed to stop and start trains on cue. But even then, nothing went smoothly. Operators missed marks. One scene had to be reshot when a train overshot its cue by 2 blocks. Friedkin threatened to walk unless they got the shot right. One assistant director later admitted, "We were one broken break away from headlines." 10th Gene Hackman actually fired a real gun, twice. In one scene, Popeye Doyle fires his weapon during a foot chase. But what most don't know is that Hackman didn't use a prop gun. He used a real one. Friedkin insisted on authenticity, and in 2 takes, Hackman discharged live blanks from a real revolver. In the chaos, a pedestrian, not part of the production, ducked for cover and later tried to sue the studio, thinking it was a real shooting. The case was quietly settled. Hackman was shaken by the experience and told Friedkin he wouldn't do it again unless proper precautions were taken. Friedkin's response? We got the shot. That's all that matters. If these stories already have your jaw on the floor, just wait. We're only halfway through. The back half of the French Connections production is even darker, weirder, and more dangerous. So go ahead and like and subscribe, because this next stretch might just change the way you watch this movie forever. 11. Hackman accidentally injured a civilian during the chase shoot. While filming the chaotic car pursuit under the elevated train, Hackman, who insisted on doing some of his own driving, clipped a civilian's vehicle. The man wasn't an extra. He didn't know filming was happening. No one was seriously hurt, but the man sued. The production settled privately. Hackman reportedly felt deeply shaken, even ashamed. He later said it was the moment he realized how far the film was pushing the limits, ethically, legally, and morally. What looked like thrilling action was inches away from real disaster. 12. The original ending was even darker, and the studio rejected it. The final shot of the French Connection is famously abrupt. A single gunshot echoes, and the screen fades to black. But Friedkin originally filmed a much bleaker ending. Doyle accidentally kills an undercover federal agent during the chaos. Fox executives refused to keep it. They feared it would make Popeye Doyle irredeemable, not an anti-hero, but a monster. So Friedkin trimmed the ending and left it ambiguous. What you don't see is the accidental killing that haunts Doyle's real-life counterpart to this day. 13. Friedkin fired his first editor, then reshot half the movie. The early cut of the French Connection was slow, uneven, and missing its edge. Friedkin was furious. He fired the original editor and brought in Jerry Greenberg, a bold cutter known for documentary-style tension. But that wasn't enough. Friedkin reshot major sequences, including entire conversations, with new pacing, grittier lighting, and more handheld camera work. What looked like spontaneous realism was actually precision craftsmanship, stitched together after panic nearly sank the film. 14. The actor playing Sal Boca was a real Brooklyn tough guy. With a record, Tony LoBianco, who played Sal Boca, wasn't a typical actor. He grew up in Brooklyn surrounded by real street-level criminals. He knew how they talked, moved, and negotiated. That authenticity poured into his performance because he'd seen it all firsthand. What few people knew at the time was that LoBianco had once been arrested for real-life brawls and was no stranger to run-ins with the NYPD. He wasn't playing Sal Boca. He was Sal Boca, just cleaned up for the camera. 15. The film's look was inspired by wartime photography. Friedkin and cinematographer Owen Roizman studied war photojournalism before filming. They wanted the French Connection to feel like a battlefield, not a polished studio movie. They used natural lighting, long lenses, and muted color grading to create a raw, documentary-like aesthetic. That's why the film feels cold, unpredictable, and dangerous. Because it was shot like combat, not cinema. Even the grain was intentional. Grit wasn't a byproduct. It was the mission. 16. Friedkin screamed at Gene Hackman in public to get a reaction. On one difficult shoot day, Hackman couldn't find the emotional fire Friedkin wanted. So the director did something extreme. He berated Hackman in front of cast and crew, shouting insults and personal jabs until Hackman exploded. Off camera. Then Friedkin whispered, "Now, action." What followed was one of the most intense moments in the film. Hackman later said he was furious, but understood the result. It wasn't direction. It was provocation, and it made Popeye Doyle unforgettably real. 17. One scene was shot from a wheelchair. When budget constraints threatened the need for expensive dolly equipment, Friedkin improvised. Instead of traditional camera rigs, he had the cinematographer pushed through scenes in a wheelchair. The result? Smooth, organic motion that mimicked human observation. It's how they filmed several of the most intimate indoor tracking shots. No high-tech gear, just grit, wheels, and instinct. A $10 wheelchair replaced a $10,000 dolly. Sometimes, the best shots are born from desperation. 18. Roy Scheider was almost killed during a stakeout scene. In one nighttime sequence, Scheider's character trails a suspect through a shadowy neighborhood. What wasn't scripted was the appearance of a real man with a gun, who thought Scheider was a threat. The man was a local off-duty officer. He didn't recognize Scheider. He thought someone was stalking the neighborhood and drew his weapon. A quick-thinking crew member shouted, "It's a movie!" just in time. Scheider laughed it off later, but admitted he felt the cold metal of the gun barrel on his temple. The scene made the cut. The near-fatal misunderstanding didn't. 19. The script was constantly rewritten on the fly. Despite being based on Robin Moore's non-fiction book, the screenplay was in flux from day one. Scenes were rewritten daily, often moments before shooting. Dialogue changed based on weather, actor input, or simply Friedkin's instincts. In fact, the famous "pick your feet in Poughkeepsie" line was improvised that morning by Eddie Egan, the real-life Popeye Doyle. There was no master plan, just controlled chaos, and lightning captured in real time. 20th. The studio didn't believe in the movie until Cannes changed everything. Before its release, 20th Century Fox had little faith in the French Connection. They buried it in the release schedule, gave it a modest marketing budget, and assumed it would vanish quickly. But then came Cannes. The film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival to thunderous acclaim. Critics called it revolutionary. Audiences gasped. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the studio scrambled to promote it. Within months, the French Connection dominated the box office and swept the Oscars. Not a sure thing. Not a hit waiting to happen. A miracle. Bonus fact: one of the film's consultants was later investigated for murder. One of the real-life narcotics officers Friedkin consulted, who helped shape the character of Popeye Doyle, was later implicated in a federal investigation tied to organized crime and murder. While he was never charged, rumors swirled that he was involved in the death of a confidential informant who threatened to expose dirty cops. Friedkin years later admitted, "Some of the people we worked with were not clean, but they made the film honest." So the line between fiction and reality? Blurry, dangerous, and soaked in blood. The French Connection wasn't just a movie. It was a high-speed collision between truth and illusion. A film that blurred the line between performance and peril, artistry and anarchy. Its legacy lives not in polish, but in risk, in broken rules, in stolen shots, and in the knowledge that sometimes great cinema demands reckless faith. So if this breakdown shook your view of a classic, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Because we've got more untold movie secrets coming your way. And remember, in the world of movies, not everything is make-believe. Some of it is just barely survived.